West this Monday afternoon. Now it's time to get out into the wilds, out into the great outdoors. And spring is a great time, obviously, for those that are interested in those of us who have a passion for, or just a passing interest in what is around us. Because, you know, you have the wee lambs jumping about in the fields, and leaves are sprouting on trees. And, of course, wildflowers are starting to bloom, and birds are coming back. So it's a great time, and Angus Kennedy from Nature Northwest is here in studio to enlighten us a little bit and sort of to flesh out some of the stuff that we are seeing around us. Angus, you're welcome to the show again.
John, thank you very much. Good to be here.
Now let us let's talk about flowers first of all. And at this time of the year, I suppose when we're looking around, we think about daffodils and snowdrops and so on, but there's a lot of flowers, and you mentioned off air there a second ago, a lot of yellow flowers to look out for that are coming into bloom now this time.
Yeah, some people even call this time of year yellow season, this little period around about the equinox, or we're just after the equinox now, which is that equal period of day and night. And every day the day is getting a bit longer, and there's more energy, and our flowers are responding. Right. And a lot of the very first flowers to come out are the flowers that will attract the bumblebees, and bumblebees love yellow. So a lot of the flowers that are coming out now are yellow flowers.
So this is all a part of the cycle. Bumblebees are coming out, and they're going to need food, and so we need them to look for food and pollinate. Is that how it works?
That's exactly it. And all of these crucial links that are happening and help us and help our farmers grow our crops, and help you grow your plants and your vegetables in your garden, your plants in your garden, your flowers, your wildflowers that we have. 1/3 of the food that we all eat comes from pollinated crops, so crops that have had bumblebees and butterflies and whatnot visiting them. And this time of year, the new bumblebees have emerged. They've been sleeping, the queens, last year's queens, that were born late in the summer, and they went and they hibernated effectively for the winter time, and they've emerged now very, very hungry, and they need food, and they're on the lookout, especially for yellow flowers.
And they fly low, is that right?
Yeah, so you can see them. Well, you'll see them in all sorts of different places. They can be as big as half your thumb. So they're big. Some of them can not far off an inch, or certainly 3/4 of an inch. Big, round, hairy, bumbling bumblebees. The wonderful things make a great sound, and they'll be up high in the likes of the willow trees. They'll be anywhere that they will find some flowers. But if you see them low, cruising across your lawn or cruising across the ditches and underneath the hedges, that's them scenting with their feet, because they have scent glands in their little feet, and they're trying to pick up little traces of old nests, of maybe mouse nests, and they're looking for a place to start a nest themselves, to lay some eggs and start their own colony for the summer. Right. So that's what they're at when you see them flying low like that. Scanning around, and you'll often see them then stop for a little break, because they work pretty hard. They're feeding as much as they can themselves, and they're looking for that new nest place, and they're full of eggs. So you'll often see them stopping. If you do see them stopping, leave them alone. If they're still there after an hour or two, maybe you could give them a little bit of and a little bit of water with sugar diluted in it. Is a good thing to give them a bit of feed if there isn't enough flowers about. But this time of year, you'll see them stopping, taking a little break, and then cruising around, exploring those ditches.
Why are they called bumblebees? Is it because they look like they bumble from flower to flower?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's their flight pattern, and the flight of the bumblebee. And if you've never heard the flight of the bumblebee, Google that, and it's just the most amazing piece of music. It's a fantastic thing, and it really encapsulates their pattern. They do seem to fly all over the place, but they're remarkably strong, remarkably resilient little characters, really. They're out now, which is a little bit early for a lot of the insects. A lot of the insects would be too cold, the frosty nights would be too cold, but bumblebees have an ability to be able to buzz on the ground, or underneath the ground in their nest, if that's what they are, to effectively like shivering, like we do, which builds up their body heat, because their body heat needs to be fairly close to what ours is, their internal body temperature. And then once they've built up that temperature, their hairy little body helps insulate them, and off they go, and they fly off in their bumbling way.
And then when they find a place to nest, what's the process then? What starts then?
Yeah, so then they'll go in and they'll create little chambers, and they'll start to out of a wax that they're able to create, and then they lay their eggs into that, and then they keep flying out to flowers, and they will visit potentially thousands of flowers in a day, and they're looking for the nectar, which is at the bottom of the flower themselves. That's for their own fuel, but they're also looking for the pollen. And if you have a little look at a bumblebee in your garden or in the ditch, or next time you're walking, stop and watch them. And often you'll see a little orange or a little yellow sticky deposit on their legs. And that's the pollen that they're collecting, and they're sticking it onto their legs because they bring that back to the nest and they feed that to the babies. So the next generation of them, the worker bees, which are little clones of that queen, they will all eat that pollen to start off. And then they'll start collecting pollen themselves once they form into adults. And at that stage, the queen doesn't leave again, stays in the nest, keeps laying eggs, but she'll never leave that nest again.
Finds a home. Okay, if you've got a question for Angus, then feel free to get in touch. 086 60 25,000. That is by text message or also on WhatsApp. Now, just going back to flowers, common flowers that we see, a lot of yellow flowers. I suppose we mentioned yellow flowers, you have to think of buttercups.
Yeah, so buttercups are starting off now, and there's actually 4 different buttercups that we have in Ireland. And there's the creeping buttercup, which is very common on the lawn. They'll be coming up quite soon. And then there's a taller one that we'll see if we don't go cutting all of our roadside verges and the little wild corners in our fields and our gardens. You'll get this beautiful flower called the meadow buttercup, and it'll grow up as tall as your knee. And then there's another one that's very like the buttercup. It's part of the buttercup family, called celandine. And it's really abundant now. And a lot of people will know the celandines. They've got 8 petals. And they've got a little heart-shaped leaf, and they start appearing around about Valentine's Day. And I remember when I was learning, that's how I remember the name, because it sounds a bit like Valentine. That's how my head works. And
association.
That little association, yeah. And the celandine with its heart-shaped leaf appears around Valentine's Day, and it'll keep flowering now for the next few weeks. And crucial as a pollen source for those early bumblebees and for some of the other species that come out now as well. Plus, very beautiful for us to look at,
What about the cowslip? When does it?
Cowslip is now as well, and cowslip is part of the primrose family, the primula family, and prime, of course, meaning number 1. So the prime rose, the very first of the roses that comes out. So the primrose, the cowslip, they start appearing now from, well, even in March and certainly April onwards. And they've an amazing story, the amazing distribution pattern. If you think of the primroses in particular, the cowslips, which is like a tall primrose, and we don't get as many of those, unfortunately. We need our wildflower meadows. They would have been something that would have been very common 30, 40, 50 years ago, but there's not as many places of them anymore. Primroses are hardier, as in they're able to survive in little ditches and damp places, so they're still clinging on to the edges that we haven't.
And they're beautiful looking.
We haven't mowed.
They look very delicate, but they're beautiful looking.
Very beautiful looking thing, and they have that light yellow, and that's what lures in the pollinating insect. The pollinating insects can see in a UV spectrum that we can't see at all. So those yellows that you see all around us at the moment, they're shining out as if they were lit up with little LEDs to the pollinators. And the pollinator sees that bright yellow, and that light bright yellow, and then it lands. And if you look closely at a primrose, and stop beside one today now over the next few days if you're walking out and about over the Easter break, and you'll see there's a deeper yellow on the inside, and that's like the runway lights, I suppose, for the bumblebee, and it knows where to go in, and it goes down into that hole that deep
center.
yellow guides it into, gets the nectar for itself, gets the pollen for its babies, pollinates the flowers while they're at it, and the flower gets fertilised. But their story doesn't end there, because how do the seeds then spread? Once those flowers are fertilised or pollinated, they'll of course turn into seeds. Or fertilise the seeds will develop, and then those seeds need to spread around the place. And how that's done is quite an amazing thing, really.
Speaking of pollinators, birds are not and bumblebees not the only pollinators, because there's ants can pollinate as well. Now, I didn't know that, and there's a certain name for it.
There is, yeah. It's our word of the day today, myrmecochory. Myrmecochory is ant farming, and the fancy term for ant farming is myrmecochory, and that doesn't mean humans going off and farming ants. It means ants farming themselves. Just like we collect seeds, and we collect seeds to eat ourselves for later on to turn into bread or to grow more crops. Well, some species of ant do the same thing with seeds as well, and it's such a common thing. It's got its own word, known as myrmecochory. And next time you see a primrose, next time you drive past a primrose, there's a good chance, if a human didn't put it there, it was planted by myrmecochory, by ants. Because primroses, and quite a range of flowers do this. The dog violets do this. The wood anemones do this. So a lot of flowers that'll be familiar to people out and about The little seeds have a tiny packet of nutrition onto them. And built onto them as an extra piece jutting out, and the ants use that like a little handle, and they're able to carry it off to their nest site, and then they store that and they feed that to their babies or feed it to themselves later on. They eat that little package of nutrition, and then they discard the seed. The seed might be thrown out of the ant hive, or it might be put into a kind of rubbish pile type place that they have. Ants are very organised little creature, and then that seed will be able to germinate and grow. It'll be completely unharmed. So it's a wonderful relationship. The primrose or the wood anemone is providing food for the ants, and the ants are providing seed distribution for those creatures. We've all seen the David Attenborough shows with the ants carrying leaves across the jungle in Panama or wherever it is. Well, this same kind of thing is going on, just on a smaller scale in your garden or in your woodland. And the crucial thing for us to make sure we still have primroses is to make sure we have little corridors for these creatures to go. And that's where our ditches, our wonderful ditches that we have in Donegal, our wonderful hedgerows that we have in Donegal, are so important to keep those little corridors safe and keep them full of different plants. Because it's not just the birds that we often talk about that use those corridors and use those little mini habitats. It's creatures like ants as well, planting primroses for our entertainment around Easter.
Just before we move on from plants that are in bloom or coming into bloom, the blackthorn.
Yeah, blackthorn is one of my very favourites, and it's an amazing plant of contrast. Blackthorn is invisible to most of us most of the year. It's fairly common as a hedgerow plant, again, not nearly as common as the better known hawthorn. And the hawthorn, its leaves are coming out now. That bright green, that lovely light green leaf is out now. It'll darken now over the next few weeks. But right now you see it popping out. Its flowers, the hawthorn's flowers, won't come out until May. It's often called the May bush. Whereas blackthorn is a little different. The blackthorn, the flowers are out now. And the thorns and the branches on it are very dark, hence the name, but they really pop out. So if you're out and about right now or later on today, look around you, because they won't last much longer. Blackthorn only lasts for a couple of weeks, really, and it's been flowering for the last 2 weeks. And you'll see these beautiful little 5-petaled, bright white flowers. And oftentimes when the weather is still, you'll see lots of hoverflies and bees and other characters that are using as well. They love them. And then once those flowers fall off in the next few days and the next good bit of wind and a bit of cold weather and the rest, the blackthorn fades back into the hedge, and we don't really notice it again until autumn time, when we see its lovely sloes, lovely colourful purple berries.
Now, birds are coming here in greater numbers at this time of the year, and coming here for milder weather in some cases. It's not that it's very mild out there today, but also for food, for the abundance of food that we have in this country. So the more popular ones now to look out for would include what? Swallow, is that the swallow?
The swallow will come back quite soon. There hasn't been any swallows. Actually, there was a sighting of one last week in Donegal. One swallow, but really, it's another few weeks. It's the end of this month before they come back. Sometimes even into May. But they're on the way. There's plenty of sightings of them in France. There's sightings of them in Britain. They will spread up throughout Ireland very soon. But already, some of the warblers, which are small little birds, but the size of a robin, quite often kind of olivey, browny type colours, quite often hide quite well, but going by their name, the warblers, they love to sing, and they have amazing songs. So the chiff-chaff warbler has already arrived. There's another little warbler called the blackcap, little grey bird with a black cap on its head, or the female has a bright orange cap on its head, and they have a beautiful song. And I saw my first one of those in Milford just yesterday. Well, I heard it first and then spotted it. So those birds are coming back up from Africa. Another one to watch out for that is a lovely thing is along the coast. You'll hear the scratchy sound of the sandwich terns. And there's a few different species of terns, and terns look very like seagulls with very sharp wings, I suppose, very stiff, sharp wings. But the terns, they dive down for their food. So they won't land onto the water and pop their head in. They'll dive from a height. So they'll hover and dive, and that's how you know them. And it's a real sign of the changing of season if you're walking on a beach anywhere around Donegal. I
think a lot of us would have seen them in action, maybe even, and assumed that they were gulls, but maybe gulls is the generic term for them.
Well, they're a little bit different. So there's the gull family, and some of them are with us all year. Some come and visit us in the winter, and others then come up this way for the summer to breed. But the terns are different again. And some of the terns have, the Arctic tern, for instance, one of the longest migrations of any bird in the world. They're amazing things, really. There's quite a few different species of tern. The sandwich tern, the most common of them, so the most likely one that you're going to come across. And you'll hear its screeching sound. If you hear a sound, you've got to tune in the ears, but you hear a sound that's a little bit different to just the normal call of the gulls. Look up and look around you, and you'll see these characters diving down and then coming up with tiny little sand eels or little sprats that we have all along our estuaries. They're a beautiful sight, and another reminder of how we need to look after our water, what goes into our water courses, what goes into our sea, because these characters have been coming before ever we decided to pitch up and build our towns and villages and the rest.
And whether it's the slightly bigger birds like terns or the smaller birds like chaffinches and swallows and so on, where is the best place to see them? Should it be along the coast, or do birds go back to where they were the previous year, or they go in? Some go inland, some stay near the coast.
Yeah, so very much depends. And in the wintertime, is all about the coastal birds. So in the wintertime, we got all the swans and the geese and the waders, the ones with the big long beaks, and of course all the different types of ducks. And they're still here, and the likes of the Brent geese. I saw some of those just yesterday, and they will be heading back up to their breeding grounds inside the Arctic Circle in Canada, the Brent goose. And they'll be heading back up there very soon. Next couple of weeks, they'll suddenly be gone. We do get a certain amount of coastal birds like those terns that come and visit, and there's others as well. But really, the dawn chorus that we think of around this time of year, that's woodland. You need woodland, you need trees, you need scrub, and the more density you have, the more layers in a woodland, the more is the likes of the willow warbler that's going to come back, one of our most common migratory species. Over 1 million willow warblers are going to land now in the next few weeks.
So more hiding places that they have.
More hiding places, and they nest low down. They nest below your knee height, so they need really dense vegetation to make sure the cat can find them and all the other characters. Whereas some of the other birds, then the chiff-chaff, which looks very like a willow warbler but has a different song, it'll nest a bit higher up, or the black cap a bit higher up. So anywhere where you can get a good vegetation mix, but go into those woods, go into those native woods that have lots of shrubs, lots of native trees. Go to Glenveigh, go to Ards. We did a walk last weekend, or last Friday, in Ards Friary, and the bird song was just fantastic. And walking all the way around there through into Ards Forest Park it's sensational.
All right, finally, Angus, and staying on the subject of birds, you're giving a talk later this month in Letterkenny about just ordinary garden birds. Yeah,
so this is something that is organised by Letterkenny Tidy Towns, and Letterkenny is lucky. There's a very active, very engaged Tidy Town group, and they're not just about tidying. They get the idea of the environment and looking after the environment, and they run some pretty interesting talks. So they had a couple of great talks on bees last year. So I'll have to be on my game, because they've set a high standard. We're going to be doing a talk on the 19th of April in the Station House, and it's at 8 p.m. But now you have to book. So Letterkenny Tidy Towns, on their Facebook page, they will have up in the next few days an Eventbrite link, and I'll share that in my own social media channels too. And then you'll book through there. And we're going to be talking about birds, garden birds, what they do to the four seasons, and we're going to talk a little bit about some lost sounds as well. Birds like the curlew and like the lapwing that used to be really common in the fields around us, but now are nearly gone. Okay. So we'll touch on that too.
Okay. Angus, until next time, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, John.